The next morning, Delilah was still making noises and faces. Simon was still hard at work, adding the finishing touches to his latest formula. His arms and hands were burned and irritated by the chemicals he had fallen into the night before, only just beginning to feel the pain. He held the flask up and admired it like a trophy. He took a fresh syringe and filled it with the serum. He went over to his computer bride and injected the fluid into the brain jar. The liquids merged. Delilah calmed down, eventually letting out a relieving sigh. The lights calmed down and the switches flickered less frequently, eventually stopping altogether. Her face became calm and expressionless. Simon took a seat before his bride. How do you feel, Delilah? He asked.
I feel tired,
she replied.
I feel relaxed. I feel contained. I'm still trapped, but I'm calm.
You'll be sedated for a while, but you'll feel right as rain within a few hours.
Don't put me to sleep. It's just darkness. It's blackness. It's complete, utterly insufferable blackness. Don't send me there.
Simon, saddened by his wife's morbid words, lowered his head and rubbed his eyes. He rested his chin against his knuckles. I won't do that to you, he said. Not again. I'll see you never have to fear death again, my love. No one will. Simon slowly got up and went up the stairs.
Don't go,
Delilah whispered.
Come back. Please. Come back.
When Simon returned to the lounge, he saw Todd fast asleep in Delilah's armchair. Furious, he wiped his glasses with a cloth and marched over, cuffing the young man over the back of the head to wake him up instantly. Ow! Cried Todd. Get up! Simon demanded. He grabbed Todd and aggressively pulled him out of the chair before throwing him onto the ground. Todd begged for mercy as if he was about to be killed. Shut up! Simon barked. This is her chair. It needs to remain fresh, clean, and ready for her when she is complete. I apologise, Simon, said Todd as he slowly got himself back up onto his feet. I had no idea. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to go to sleep again. Properly. You can have one of the guest rooms. Follow me. Simon led Todd up to the guest room. It was fairly spacious, although a portion of it was taken up by Delilah's old clothes and coats hanging from railings with her shoes underneath. There was a single bed, a lone window, a bulb hanging from the ceiling, and the door had a key lock. Simon unlocked and opened the door, standing aside so Todd could enter. He took the key out and poked Todd in the back with it. Todd turned in surprise and looked down at the key. He slowly and creepily took it from Simon, who was made uncomfortable by the spider brushing his fingertips against his palm. I understand if you don't feel safe around me, Simon, said Todd. If I can hurt him, why wouldn't I be able to hurt you? I'll slip the key under the door. Todd slowly closed the door and locked it from the inside. As promised, he slipped the key under the crack. Simon grabbed it, looked at the door, pocketed the key, and hurried back downstairs. As Simon re-entered the cellar, he was pleasantly surprised to find Delilah was in a calm state, but her face had a sinister look about it he didn't pick up on. He hurriedly took a seat at the desk to speak to his computerized bride. All is well, my lovely, said Simon. Just a little more planning and a little more time.
They'll come for us, Simon,
said Delilah. I'm sorry?
They'll come here. They'll be looking for him. You can't let that boy leave. He'll tell them. He'll be fine for a while, maybe, but he'll crack. We can't trust him. You must leave him there. Let him die.
Delilah, I can't. He
You
won't.
never liked that boy, did you? I never did. He's a rattish, hideous thing. I hate him. He must die. He must die. Let him die. Nobody will miss him.
Simon paused for a moment, unsure of what to say. Yes, he said. Yes, I suppose so, yes. I'll just leave him in there. I won't kill him. He locked himself in and gave me the key. He'll die by his own hand.
He sealed his own fate,
said Delilah.
He killed Frank. He killed himself. You have one job left, Simon.
Simon looked up at Delilah like a scared puppy waiting for its next treat.
You must restore me,
said Delilah.
You've brought me back to life, so now you must complete me.
Yes, said Simon. Yes, Delilah, yes. I will. I shall!
Have you missed me?
Yes.
Have you missed the sound of my voice?
Yes.
You still can't quite believe I'm here, can you?
No, I can't.
So much self-doubt. So much insecurity. So much anxiety. Touch yourself.
I'm sorry, what was that? Said Simon.
I want you to masturbate for me,
said Delilah.
You've missed my body, haven't you? You can enjoy my voice and my commands for now. We'll become physical again soon enough. Just touch yourself.
Simon nervously sat there and thought for a moment. He ultimately decided to undo his zipper and reached into his trousers. He stood up and exposed himself to the main monitor. Delilah moaned and snickered as Simon began playing with himself.
That's a good boy,
she whispered amorously.
That's a good boy. Enjoy it. Oh, you like my voice, don't you? You've missed it, haven't you? Good boy.
Simon caressed Delilah's computer body as he pleasured himself and began to cry, overwhelmed with sexual frustration, sadness, and humiliation. At the Flores residence, the couple had invited Frank's wife Lisa over. She was an emotional and constantly worried English housewife. She loved and was endlessly loyal to her family, and hated to think anyone she cared about would be in some kind of harm. She was always dressed a little over-fancy in fluffy coats and dresses. She had a slightly gummy upper row of teeth which caused them to stick out slightly when she opened her lips. She was sitting on the couch in tears, wiping her eyes with some tissue. Kathy comforted her while Jorge walked in holding a glass of water with lime cordial. He handed it to Lisa before taking a seat on the armchair. "Thank you, Jorge," said Lisa before taking a sip. "I just don't understand it. What if he's having an affair shagging some prosy on the side? He usually at least gives a bit of warning before not showing up like that. It was so last minute. I know he loves the kids, but I don't know if he loves me. He hasn't looked me in the eyes after coming once in the last 4 months." Jorge began to chuckle uncontrollably, carefully disguising it as a cough into his fist. Lisa didn't realise, but Kathy gave Jorge a stern look. He shrugged and pulled a face. Kathy continued to comfort Lisa. "He doesn't stay away for this long either," cried Lisa. "It's been 3 days now. I don't know if I should call the police because they might think I'm being anxious. I don't know what to tell the girls when I pick them up from their after-school classes instead of their father." There, said Kathy. "Is there any place you think he'd go?" "No. Like I said, he normally tells me. He could be going fishing or visiting his mother or... Well, I did notice something a little strange recently." "What?" I stumbled across his work diary the other week while I was cleaning his office. I didn't mean to have a nose about, but I thought I'd have a peek. Just work stuff, mostly. I didn't know he disliked Michael Stanley in your class so much, Jorge. He called him a little cunt. I didn't think he was that bad, said Jorge. He wrote about something unusual. It was about Simon. Simon? Simon. Dr. Simon Morgan. Well, that's what it said. Frank wrote that Simon had been asking a lot of him recently. He said he was happy that Morgan was paying for it all, but that the accountants were sure to notice and would start asking questions soon. I thought it was the strangest thing, because Morgan hasn't been in since Delilah died, has he? I don't think Frank is gay, but I always thought Simon could be. What if he's luring my Frankie into something? As Lisa broke down crying again, Kathy comforted her while looking over at Jorge. The couple shared confusion. Lisa composed before excusing herself to go and use the restroom. As she stood up and left the room, she blew her nose, and Jorge jumped up and took a seat next to Kathy. Am I the only one who heard that? He asked. What, about Simon? Said Kathy. So I'm not going crazy. Either that or we both are. Do you think... No, that's not Simon or Frank's style. Especially Frank. It does sound like they're doing some shady business, though. What was it Simon told you? Jorge thought for a second before paraphrasing to Kathy what Simon had told him about saving people with the work he was doing, including Delilah. Sounds like he's funding his own work, said Kathy. And Frank was the man in the middle making sure it got delivered safely and secretly, said Jorge. I need to go back there. Whether Simon lets me or not, I have to know what he's doing. Kathy suggested that Jorge take her to the house as well, which caught Jorge completely off guard. Maybe I can talk to him, use the old feminine touch, eh? She said. Simon always had a soft spot for women. He was more awkward around them the same as he would be with anyone else, but he was far more open. Are you sure? Said Jorge. I mean, what if he and Frank are in that creepy cellar of his doing God knows what and don't take kindly to a petite Danish educator bursting in and asking questions? He or they are not going to hurt me, Jorge, but they might hurt you. Kathy elbowed her husband in a teasing manner. If he tries anything, I'll just grab his neck and shove him away by the face. Don't remind me of that. We'll go on Saturday. All right? The two of them began to hear crying and sniffling. Jorge moved back into his chair just before Lisa entered the room, wiping her eyes and her nose with a tissue. She sniffled. I haven't cried this much since Sylvia called me a gummy cow at my 29th. Lisa took a seat next to Kathy. Kathy put an arm over Lisa's back and her other hand on Lisa's leg. Jorge looked around, unsure of what to think, holding his hand to his mouth. Saturday. Todd remained locked in the guest room. He was dehydrated, starved, and curled up in the corner as his mouth dried like the Sahara and his stomach moaned like a wild animal. The door unlocked and someone opened it. Todd, clinging to life, looked up at a figure wearing a hazmat suit and firmly gripping a baton. Todd reached an arm out to him. Please, he moaned weakly. Could I just have something to drink, please? The figure ignored the plea, stepping in front of Todd and raising the baton above their head before swinging it down to whack him over the head as hard as they could. The figure unmasked. As the spiderish young man suspected, the last thing he saw with his blurred vision was Simon, whispering the name of the man he admired so much one last time before being bludgeoned in the face, killing him. Simon, no longer wearing the suit, dropped a duffel bag with Todd's corpse inside of it down on the ground in front of a large glass vat with artificial stomach acid inside. The vat of digestive fluid was connected to Delilah with various thin tubes made of plastic and flesh. He put a mask over his nose and mouth before walking over to Delilah and doing some finishing touches on the tubes.
Why are you focusing on improving this body when you should be making me a new one?
Said Delilah. It's going to take some time, Delilah, said Simon. This is just a test, if you will. And it'll help to dispose of our problems.
I'm not something to test, Simon. I'm your wife.
I know, Do you ever get feelings of hunger?
No. But I desire the feeling of eating and digesting. I can't explain it.
Call it a harmless glitch, but a normal one. I think I can alleviate the feeling. Simon moved back over to the duffel bag and pulled out Todd's severed arm. He went over to the vat and gently lowered the limb into it. The liquid fogged and sizzled as the limb dissolved. Delilah's face on the monitor looked relieved. She moaned in pleasure as the flesh, bone, and blood were processed by her core.
I always wondered what that little creep would taste like,
she said.
Why can't I taste him?
Without saying a word, Simon sat at the desk and typed into the computer, specifically the code that related to the sensation of flavour and taste, making it so the taste of Todd's flesh was wired into Delilah's brain, allowing her to process it through her taste receptor, prompting her facial expression to change slightly. Simon quickly got up and grabbed Todd's decapitated head before gently placing it into the acid. While it dissolved, he further input flavour codes and tampered with some of the computer's innards. Delilah entered a state of ecstasy as the head was gruesomely dissolved and absorbed by her. Simon subsequently input a setting so Delilah could continue to taste without the need of manual input.
I feel his melted flesh flowing through me,
said Delilah.
Feeding me. It tastes interesting.
Well, I'm glad you like it, said Simon. Perhaps when he's defrosted, I could cook up some Frank Doherty steak with peppercorn sauce.
I always wondered what he'd be like inside me.
Simon was slightly put off and embarrassed by the remark. He lowered his head before grabbing some more Todd out of the duffel bag for his wife to enjoy. Later that afternoon, Jorge and Kathy pulled up a few yards away from Simon's house. The two of them stared intently at the gate. I'll be right out here, said Jorge. Anything goes wrong, just scream as loud as you can. Don't worry about me, said Kathy. I'll just kick them in the balls if anything goes wrong. I still think we should call the police. And tell them what? We haven't actually got anything. We have to know what we're reporting before we report it. Jorge reluctantly agreed before asking Kathy that she be careful. She exited the vehicle and made her way towards the gate. In the safety of his bedroom, Simon was fast asleep, still fully dressed with his sleeves rolled up. His arms and hands looked better, but was still suffering from irritation, being bright red and scarred. The buzzer went off downstairs, but Simon didn't hear it. It went off again. The alarm clock on the bedside table started glitching and making strange symbols before spelling out, "Awaken." An electrical current accompanied by the sound of a very loud zap went off, causing Simon to spasm and fall out of the bed. The downstairs buzzer went off again. Simon rubbed his eyes with his palms and shook his head before rushing out of the room. Back outside the walls of the property, Kathy stood at the gate and pressed the buzzer one last time before crossing her arms and looking around. She looked back at a concerned Jorge. "Hello?" asked Simon through the speaker. "Hello, Simon?" said Kathy. "Who is it?" "It's Kathy."
Kathy.
Delilah's voice whispered through the speaker. "Simon?" said Kathy, confused. "Is somebody in there with you?" "No! No, nobody here, no!" "What do you want here?" I just want to come in and see how you're doing." Simon paused. He thought for a moment before pressing and holding the comm button. Yes, I'm fine, said Simon. I imagine you want to come in? Or something? Yes, I'd like to, said Kathy. I just want to know how you're doing and make sure you're okay. We're all very worried about you. Jorge especially. It's very considerate, Kathy, but I've worked A loud ringing frequency and static interrupted the two, causing them both to recoil and cringe.
Let her in,
hissed Delilah. What? Cried Simon. Delilah, how are you?
Don't worry about that.
The static and frequency stopped.
Let her in. She'll be useful. We can use her. You can revive me.
No, I can't.
You must! I know you always wanted to tongue, finger and fuck her anyway. Now you can do both of us at the same time.
Don't speak like that! Simon? Said Kathy's voice. Hello, Simon? Are you sure you're... Yes, everything's fine, Kathy, said Simon. You must come in. I was just about to have a snack. Simon buzzed Kathy in. As the gate opened, Kathy looked over at Jorge, who was still uncertain. She decided to go inside and made the long walk up to the front door. Simon opened it and watched as Kathy made her way up towards the house. She smiled at Simon and he looked back at her blankly. He stood aside as she reached the doorstep, allowing her to enter the entry hallway. How are you, Simon? Said Kathy. I'm fine, thank you, said Simon as he closed the door. Well, what can I help you with? I just wanted to check up on you and see how you're doing. Jorge said he was worried about you. Well, I'm fine, thank you. There was an awkward pause before Kathy finally broke the tension by asking if she could come in. Simon's face fell, and his skin turned white. He thought long and hard before finally agreeing. Kathy was put off by this but ignored it, slowly entering the house. Simon closed and locked the entry hallway doors. As Kathy entered the main hall of the house, she felt a thick, intense air of misery and anguish overcome her. She wanted to grab the nearest bladed object and cut through to alleviate some of it. As soon as she heard Simon walking up behind her, she turned at high speed and immediately asked if she could use the restroom. No, Simon snapped. The bathroom's gone. Plumbing issues. I've been pissing in buckets and crapping in the garden. What? Are you feeling all right? Are you implying I've lost my mind? He said, insulted. Don't you have another bathroom, Simon? Asked Kathy. That's ours! That's my bathroom, Kathy. It'd be an invasion of privacy. Well, why don't you make us a drink and I'll promise not to go snooping around. Double vodka and lemonade, please. Squeeze of lime if you've got it. Simon was taken aback by her sudden bluntness. His submissiveness and insecurity when it came to women overpowered him, so he lowered his head like a dog. Kathy could see his wounded arm as clear as day when he readjusted his glasses. He walked around Kathy and went into the kitchen to prepare her drink. Kathy waited a second before carefully walking up the stairs. She stopped, only then catching on to a strange smell, that being a vinegar-like odour originating from the cellar. She tried her best to forget about it and continued upstairs. Kathy nosed around Simon's bedroom. It was strangely tidy considering Simon's uncouth behaviour and appearance. She had a look in the drawers and under the bed before going to inspect the bathroom. Nothing. She made her way back into the upstairs hallway and noticed that one of the guest room doors had been left open. Kathy crept over and peered inside, seeing nothing unusual. As she looked in the corner, however, she noticed something strange on the ground, approached it, and crouched down. The thing on the ground was a piece of bloody scalp with hair still attached. What haunted her most about the sight was the memory of her younger sister getting her hair caught in a drilling machine during one of their workshop classes. causing a chunk of her scalp to be twisted off in half a second. She used a tissue to pocket the scalp and left the room. Kathy peered over the banister to look downstairs and saw Simon walk towards the cellar door with a glass of vodka and lemonade, with a quarter of a lime slice in one hand, a brandy on the rocks in the other. He stopped and looked up. Kathy moved away just in time not to be seen. "If you can hear me in there, then I'm going into the cellar," said Simon. "Your drink is on the side." Simon entered the cellar and slammed the door shut. Kathy quietly continued her exploration of the house, her next destination being the cinema room. She was repulsed by the state of it, considering her admiration for what a wonderful space it used to be, although she noticed the 2 chairs where Simon and Delilah used to sit in comparatively good condition. Against her better judgment, Kathy headed for the upstairs bathroom door. She slowly gripped the doorknob, twisted it, and pulled it open. The sight was awful. The sink was full of bloody water with chunks of flesh floating about. The bath was covered in streaks of blood stains and pieces of skin, and the floor was wet and covered in blood. Kathy's jaw dropped. She inhaled so she could scream, but nothing came out. She slammed the door shut and immediately ran downstairs to escape. The entry hallway doors and the front doors quietly swung open by themselves. Kathy didn't care. She made a beeline for the outside world, but was stopped by the front door slamming itself shut and locking. She desperately slammed her hands against the door and cried out for her husband until her palms were sore. Thinking quickly, Kathy ripped her coat off, wrapped it around her fist, and punched through the glass until making an opening big enough to fit through. She threw her coat aside and attempted to escape. As soon as her bare hand touched one of the thin metal frames, an electrical current surged through the house and shocked her, causing her to fall onto a spiny bush unconscious. Simon burst out of the cellar and ran over to the entry hallway. Seeing what happened to Kathy, he hurriedly opened the front door and ran around to drag her back inside.
She was cut badly.
In the car, Jorge started to become worried and frustrated. He jumped out and carefully walked over to the gate. What he saw caused all other cares he had in the world to immediately leave his mind as he entered a state of gorilla-like rage. His unconscious, bleeding wife being dragged into the building with her head hanging low and her arms dangling. A nervous Simon stopped and dropped Kathy, only infuriating Jorge even more. He began banging and shaking the gate like an animal. "I'll slit your throat, you worthless freak! I'll kill you! I'll kill you! You touch my wife, I send you to live with yours in hell, you fucking piece of..." Jorge was cut off by a powerful stream of electricity surging the metal gate and spreading to his body. The shock was so overwhelming that Jorge's heart stopped momentarily and he fell hard onto his back. A high-frequency static played on the speaker by the front door outside.
Hurry up!
Delilah's voice hissed.
Get her in here! If I'm lucky, I think I killed that stupid bastard!
What? Cried Simon as he grabbed Kathy and continued to drag her inside.
Shut up! Just get her inside! I need her. Need you. Hurry!
Once Simon had Kathy in and laid out in the hallway, he ran back to the door and looked at Jorge, unsure if he was alive or not.
We'll deal with him later!
Delilah hissed.
Just deal with her first.
Delilah, someone will see him, said Simon. I can't just leave him. The speaker sparked and exploded, spooking Simon and causing him to fall onto the ground. The front door slammed shut. Simon got up and ran towards Kathy, dragging her towards the cellar door. He opened it and looked down, trying to figure out a plausible way of getting Kathy down without harming her any further.
Just throw the bitch down!
Delilah hissed.
I can fix her afterwards.
But Delilah, said Simon, we need her to...
Shut up! Just toss her down! I can fix her!
With reluctance, Simon dragged Kathy to the top of the steps before taking a few more seconds to push her down the stairs. Like a heavy boulder rolling down a bumpy hill, Kathy tumbled down the stairs, breaking an arm, shoulder, and shin. Despite the injuries, she survived. Simon quickly jogged downstairs, almost tripping on the last step and falling on top of Kathy. He managed not to and recovered in a Keaton-esque manner just in front of his computerised wife.
Stop acting like a fool and hurry up!
Yelled Delilah. Delilah, I'm trying, but I... Before Simon could finish, Delilah fired an electric shock at him, hitting him in the shoulder. Simon fell onto the ground and grabbed his shoulder, sucking through his teeth. Delilah began yelling at him and urging him to continue, so Simon forced himself up and carefully dragged Kathy towards his wife. He went to the stairs and pulled out an operating table on wheels from underneath. After struggling to get Kathy on the table, he went to grab some scissors and cut her clothing off. Back outside, Jorge woke up with blurred vision and excruciating nausea. He tried to stand up but fell over again. He felt numb, confused, anxious, and stiff in his arms and legs. Although it took him a few minutes, he managed to perch himself up against the wall, avoiding the gate that electrocuted him. He slowly realised that hours had passed and it was night time. All this time his wife had been alone and unconscious within the walls of the house belonging to his potentially sadistic co-worker. Jorge regained enough strength to strive against the wall towards his car. He threw himself towards and landed hard against it, barely grabbing onto it to stop himself from falling again. Unknown to Jorge, an inhuman process against all things moral was taking place deep within the cellar. Simon was ashamed of himself. He had taken the life of not only his wife before reviving her as a computerized monster, but he was now using the bruised, bloodied, and partly mangled body of his friend's wife to revive his own. Kathy had dozens of thin wires with needles sticking into her, and a strange umbilical cord plugged into the back of her neck. She was still breathing, but only sporadically and slowly.
Do it,
whispered Delilah. With his head hanging low, Simon slowly walked over to his murderous machine of a wife and stood over the desk. She continued to urge him with the voice of a vicious gremlin until he finally pressed the enter key. A quiet, electric humming went off, and Kathy's body reacted. Delilah began to moan quietly before suddenly breathing in fast and heavy. Kathy did the same as her chest raised in the air and her eyes shot wide open. She began to cough splatters of blood from her mouth, causing it to splatter all over her naked skin. Simon turned to Kathy, his eyes falling on her hardened nipples pointing up at the ceiling.
Don't look at them.
Hissed Delilah's increasingly glitchy voice.
Not until they are mine.
Kathy's body began to spasm. The cord connecting to the back of her neck made grotesque squelching noises as liquids from within the techno-organic computer were pumped into Kathy's brain. Her spasms calmed down as Delilah's face began to fade out. The polygraphs, flashing lights, and nodules went ballistic before abruptly stopping entirely. The last of the fluids, including Delilah's liquidized brain, entered Kathy, but the cord continued to pulse and make strange noises. Simon was distraught. The feeling that his experiment had failed began to overwhelm him. He walked over to the computer, sat down, rested his elbow against the desk, held his head in his hand, and began to cry. Unbeknownst to Simon, Kathy slowly sat up with her eyes rolled up into the back of her head. She very slowly shifted herself onto the edge of the table and removed the pins from her body, one at a time. Simon composed himself and stood up. He turned and was startled by the sight of the woman admiring her new flesh. She turned to Simon and smiled sadistically. He was completely lost for words.
Do you like it? Asked Delilah Kathy. You've done it. You've given me life. Kathy, said Simon. This is amazing. But it's not what I was supposed to do.
What are you talking about? I needed more time. I needed a blank slate. We needed months, not mere...
Months! Months in that cold, hard shell you put me in the first place. Now I could feel... Nothing could feel worse than that metal cage. We've taken Kathy.
Delilah Kathy slowly stood up. Simon instinctively tried to move back but was stopped by the machine. Delilah Kathy began to walk closer. She's still in here, Simon, she said coldly. Her pussy, her tits, a small speck of her mind suppressed somewhere in what remains of this stupid brain. But I'm more than just a brain now. She stopped moving and froze like a statue. Only her mouth moved when she spoke. I'm flowing through this body's blood. Every inch of it is perfectly under my control. I can feel the electricity in the walls. The lights flickered. I feel the waves in your brain. I can switch them off. Like that. Simon felt lightheaded. A strange sensation overwhelmed him, followed by a severe headache before all discomfort and pain suddenly disappeared. Delilah Kathy kept her unnerving smile as she moved closer. I'm better than a human. I'm a new human, she continued. I'm the ultimate in perfection. I'm beyond life. I am living proof that God doesn't exist. I am Delilah Kathy suddenly stopped and grunted, feeling a strain on the back of her neck. She backed up a little and turned to face the cord stretching around a leg of the operating table. As timid as he was, Simon couldn't help but silently admire Delilah Kathy's buttocks while she was turned away from him, even though some of the blood had trailed down and was beginning to dry on her skin. I've missed the feeling of your awkward gaze staring at my ass, Simon, said Delilah Kathy before turning back towards Simon.
But tell me,
did you prefer staring at mine, or do you prefer staring at her more?
shapely features.
Simon didn't respond. He felt the lights going out again and almost fell over, knowing full well his own wife was tampering with his actual brain waves. Delilah Kathy giggled before getting uncomfortably close, holding Simon up as he recovered. A strange gurgling sound came from within her throat before she belched out a stream of reddish-green and black liquid. Amongst the liquid was a voice box. Disgusted, Simon sighed a deep sigh and cringed as he turned away, finding the smell to be a putrid mix of vinegar, metal, and rotten shellfish.
She said in Delilah's voice, "Tell me, do I turn you on, Simon? Do you want to kiss and lick me like I had to fucking beg you to before you cut my head open? Or did you want to do something a little more kinky, like suck my brains out of my skull?"
Simon thought to himself. He knew he had to submit if he wanted it to be over with. He turned to face Delilah Kathy and opened his eyes, looking directly at her autonomous gaze. He forced a smile and released all the tension in his body, wrapping his arms around his bride. She smiled and whispered into his ear, "All we need is each other. Just you and I. We can make a world without death. Together forever and ever. Forever and ever." As soon as Delilah Kathy spoke her last word, Simon turned her head towards his and began to kiss her passionately. He raised his hands up Delilah Kathy's back while she wrapped her leg and arms around him. As he reached the back of her neck, Simon grabbed the cord connecting Delilah Kathy to the machine and ripped it out. Delilah Kathy let out a loud gasp and pushed herself away from Simon. He gagged and spat before taking his glasses off and smashing them on the ground. Delilah Kathy began to spasm, foaming at the mouth as her eyes rolled into the back of her head. The lights in the room began to flash. Simon stared in shock as she stood on her bare tiptoes for a solid 30 seconds before falling onto the ground face first with a very loud thud. The lights stopped flashing and Delilah Kathy's stiffened body began to loosen like a rag doll, becoming completely devoid of life. Her open neck hole made gurgling and hissing sounds as the liquid spluttered out of it, pooling around the corpse. Simon sighed and wiped his forehead with relief, realising he had only changed the world in the sense that there would be quite a story to tell about the kind of man he was. He had not only ruined his career, but also failed to save his own wife and taken the life of another, feeling an onslaught of shame and sadness overwhelm him, his face growing red. Truly hopeless, Simon threw himself onto the ground next to the body and curled up into a ball, crying like a child. Simon had been so caught up he hadn't heard the dozens of sirens all swarming around the outside of his property, the gate being forced open, the front and cellar doors being bashed in, all the officers storming down the stairs and watching in shock as Simon, still crying, shifted himself towards the corpse and cuddled it.
Jesus Christ, what the hell happened here? Said one of the officers. You better tell the hospital. You might have found Mrs. Flores, said the head officer.
Two of the other officers forced Simon onto his feet, mockingly referring to him as Cupcake as they helped the emotionally destroyed man up the stairs, careful to avoid touching the fluids on his clothes. Over time, all the crime scene markers were placed, the building was taped off, the crime scene photographers started snapping, and Detective Washington arrived.
Alerting a hospitalised Jorge that his wife's body may have potentially been found wasn't an easy task, but Washington was used to it, as well as being virtually invulnerable to the emotional strain placed on the victim's next of kin. When Washington put a plastic glove on and carefully lifted the corpse's head up by its hair, he was stunned to find that the face didn't even remotely resemble what he was told Kathy looked like. The woman had bright green eyes, and a beauty spot on her cheek next to her nose, whereas Kathy had pale grey eyes, and no such beauty spot. Jorge had also told him while still in a delirious state that Kathy had blonde hair, while the corpse's hair was dark green.
"This isn't Kathy Flores," said Washington before gently putting the head down and standing up. "That sick bastard was doing this to more than just one person."
"The upstairs bathroom is completely covered in blood," said one of the officers. "As far as we know, nobody else was in the house besides Mr. Morgan, Catherine Flores, and this woman here, and we can't identify her."
"Alright. The hell is all this techno mumbo jumbo?"
Ugh, don't get me started. Wonga went shut up about how it was supposed to be his work, life, and next step to making humanity immortal or something. The officer led Washington back up the stairs so he could investigate the rest of the house. "Did you hear that?" "No," replied another photographer. "What was it?" "It was like a beep." Probably just one of those machines acting up. This place is just like one of those classic ghost labs you see in some horror cartoon. "Maybe it was the ghost in the machines," teased one of the other photographers. "Shut up, Stanley," said the first photographer. "You sound as paranoid as that doc I had to take a picture of." Freak.
Unknown to anyone, one of the arms of the polygraph moved slightly before the room fell silent like the dead once again.